Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the New Hampshire primary and what's next in the U.S. presidential campaign. Let's get back to our panel. I'm going to go back to Edward. Edward, in one of the early stages of this election, we heard an argument between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton over whether the United States can learn something from Denmark's social model. And, you know, a lot of surveys tell us that the Danes are among the happiest people in the world. They're the third happiest, actually, according to one survey. But what makes them happy? How does their political process work?
Well, I'm of course an outsider in Denmark, so I'm looking at this, looking inwards on this one. I think what you generally find is a high level, perhaps not necessarily of happiness, but a degree of satisfaction with the services that are provided, whether it's education or whether it's health services or whatever else, or transport or whatever else we're talking about. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, of course, they're good compared with other countries, but it means in terms of people's expectations and their attitudes, they're getting what they believe they deserve from a very, very high level of taxation. It's what we would call socialism here, wouldn't we, John?
We would. Yeah, Denmark is not quite the same place as America. We need to use carefully.
Well, I think that we have to really be clear about the definitions of socialism. Country. I think that, you know, one of the things that Bernie Sanders has suffered under is the word socialism. Democratic socialism, quite frankly, is part of what Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed when he talked about things like minimum wages, when he talked about health care. So while I think he suffered by mislabeling himself and perhaps will suffer in the polls, I think it's also important in a broader sense when we look at the UK, post-World War II, we look at other countries to talk about what we really meant about the role of government. We've really never had, we've allowed, quite frankly, the conservatives and Republicans to run ahead of the rest of us on how we define what people are supposed to have.
And that is a very loaded term. Let me go to Sean in New York. Sean, you know, one of the criticisms we hear about the political system here, and it's something that, you know, I alluded to earlier on, is that this is a democracy which is up for sale, that it's been bought by billionaires. And you talk to people outside the United States and they say, how can that happen? How can a billionaire buy an election in a country like the United States?
Right, and the Koch brothers, for example, have spent $400 million on both direct expenditures and on different nonprofit organizations. If you look at, say, Britain's recent election, political parties in Britain can only spend $30 million each during the entire election cycle. So you don't have quite the amount of money in these other countries. And one of the key reasons is because you have so much economic inequality. And as much as we'd like to try to limit that, economic inequality will boil over into democratic inequality. And it's a very big problem.
Can I challenge on a couple points?
Go ahead. And of course, I think what Sean is, the television advertising.
Right. Sean is making two arguments. He's making an anti-establishment argument and a money and politics argument. So the anti-establishment argument is a problem because if the establishment was that powerful, we wouldn't have seen Trump and Sanders win. So their presence proves the absence of an all-powerful establishment. So the real elites, again, are the grassroots who are changing American politics.
It'll be interesting if they actually won the election.
Well, they may.
On the Democratic side,
but in terms of money and politics, look, two case studies are very important to look at. Yesterday, in the Republican race, Jeb Bush and Chris Christie combined spent $54 million in PAC money, and Trump spent $1.8 million. They outspent Trump 30-1. And Trump got twice as many votes as they did.
Right. So this is a really simplistic way to look at money and politics.
No, it's not. Dave Bratt, who took on the House Majority. This is a very important point. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor was primaried by a guy named Dave Bratt, a Tea Party member. Dave Bratt spent $200,000 in his race. Eric Cantor spent $5 million and lost. Eric Cantor spent $261,000 on fundraising consultants, which was more than Bratt spent.
Okay. So but you know what? Here's the point that's being missed here. Here's the point that's being missed. We can look at the presidential elections and talk a lot about money and politics, which I think is really important. But let's trickle it down. Walmart ran a number on the District of Columbia, a serious number. And now they want to sue Puerto Rico. And how does Walmart get to do that? Because people have bought the politicians who allow Walmart that kind of rule-writing possibility. When we look at any number of other cases, it's not just the president is not the czar. The president also deals with these senators. Senators are for sale. You could buy a senator for $10, $12, $15 million. And so I think that the role of money in politics is really important. And I think that my friend from Demos, who has made this point, needs to make it again. Whether it shows up in the election of Trump, who's spending kind of his own money, or whether it shows up in the senators who will back a Trump or whomever, it's clear that there is a bias towards allowing people to purchase political power.
The problem isn't private spending, it's public spending. It's when politicians spend other people's money, it creates an incentive for people to donate to campaigns. So if you want to solve the money politics problem, you have to get government out of the economy.
When the Supreme Court says, corporation, throw your money out there and we don't care, there are no basic regulations, there are no limitations, then what you're saying is that corporate power turns into political power.
Money. Message Trump's money.
Okay, we're running out of time. I want to get to Edward. Edward, do the people of, say, Denmark have a preferred candidate in this election?
I think inevitably, well, at this stage, we are probably talking Bernie Sanders amongst quite a lot of people. But I think, like a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters in the United States, the question is, the open question, are people supporting him at the moment because they want to push Hillary Clinton leftwards, or are they supporting him because they want to see him as the November election candidate? Now, my suspicion, both in Europe and the United States, is that a lot of people at this stage of the game are supporting Sanders because they want Hillary Clinton to talk more loudly and more clearly about traditional Democratic Party themes or new themes such as inequality, such as Wall Street, and so on. They want her to speak loudly and clearly, and they feel at this point she's failed to do that.